So this is why I do a lot of bore cutting and cutting without a notch or cutting without a hinge. I don't have any one particular way. Every tree gets its own recipe. I mean, this is nothing special for a tree. It's not a fail by any means, but that's a lot of pulled fiber. If this was a veneer or a stave, especially if it was a fat, short stave, I'd be really mad because I'd be cutting off 14, 16 inches of wood to clean that up. Or I would haul it in as it is and they'd buck off a 39-inch noodle and only pay me for, they'd pay me one less link. It would hurt. It would hurt. Your butt cut's your best chunk of log. And it's not like this is a fat hinge. there's not I didn't gut it, but I nipped the corners, and it's not a whole lot of hinge wood. But these white oaks and red oaks over here where I'm at, they pull fiber pretty easy. So a lot of times I'll come in with a cut in the direction I think it's going to go, as if I'm going to do a notch, and I will get that tree to close itself. If it closes, I'll use an indicator wedge, which is when you set a wedge just lightly. You set a wedge in the kerf that your saw made, and it's dangling down a little bit. And you watch that wedge. As you cut, if that wedge starts to go down, your kerf is opening. Your tree's going that way. If that wedge starts to stand up like this, then your notch is closing and the tree wants to go the way you think it's going to go. The good news is this gives you all the time in the world to change your plans. All that game of logging, GOL, 2 tabs and a nip the trigger, none of that crap gives you any feedback. It doesn't tell you. The tree is not allowed. The tree is constrained. So you've gutted everything out of it. There's 3 little buttons of wood holding it up. 3 little buttons in a prayer are holding it up. And you think it's going to go to the east. And then you nip the trigger and it doesn't go. Or it spins off. It rips one tab and it spins off the other way. To me, that's dangerous. I just caught a lot of flack about not using notches or not using hinges. Slick stumping, which I did not invent. A really, really good cutter taught it to me. And I've gotten all of my tricks came from guys that are way better than I'll ever be. So it ain't like I made this stuff up. I'm talking about pro loggers every day, full-time, nothing else loggers. I'm just a now and then logger. I'm talking about great loggers have given me all these little bits and pieces, and I'm telling you that they're better than the conventional, put a notch, put a hinge, put a wedge, pound on wedges all day, and then watch half the tree bust, or watch it barber chair, all this kind of crap. Or watch it, it's perfectly controlled, except that it smashes 3 keep trees because it had a 1x20 slab of lumber and it couldn't deviate. If you leave a 1 inch thick, 20 inch wide hinge, that tree can't deviate north or south this way. It can go over like that, or it can go over like that. Either you lost it or it went correct. But if it hits something that's right here, the tree can't deviate. It can't pull away. So it smashes everything. When you cut them loose, when you chase them off, even that itty bitty maple, it will twirl around. Now see, I broke the top out of that maple. Right there. Yeah, it's a trash tree to all you guys. I mean, it'll never make a saw log, but I like to tap maple syrup. So here's this red maple. And because I didn't chase that off, because it had too much attachment to that stump, it didn't twizzle. It didn't pirouette. Instead, it whacked it and it just took it apart. Had I severed this clean, had I slick stumped it, meaning turned it completely loose, the tree is standing vertical, and I cut every bit of fiber and it goes over. And yeah, that sounds crazy. You think it's crazy, but if you haven't stood in front and watched it to see how gentle it is, a big old tree will hit a little trash stick like that and it'll roll. It'll pirouette right off of it. It's beautiful. They hit the ground gentle. I never really have felt much of a threat at all. I mean, I've had stump jumps. I've had backslides from all different styles of cutting. And barber chairs are by far the worst. A barber chair is when you have a top that says, I'm going, and a stump that says you're staying. And the hinge allows the stump to communicate its wishes. They both say opposite things, and the butt log splits in half. That's a barber chair. The mechanics of a barber chair is too much hinge. The tree starts to go and you have not severed the hinge sufficiently. You got too much hinge. The stump says, I've got influence over you through this hinge, and since you left a lot of hinge, I've got a lot of influence. The top says, yeah, well, I've got a lot of lean and a lot of weight, so I'm going. Boom, thing blows up. If you bore cut and you sever out all this wood, you can't have a barber chair. Barber chairs happen where? They happen, one side of the wood is compression, one side of the wood is tension. If the tree is leaning over this way, which this one was, then this is the compression side. It's like you got a jack stand sitting on there. This is the tension side. It's like you got a rope over here pulling it up. So this tension wood is like a cord going up the backbone of the tree. It's holding it by tension from falling over. And this is like a jacking up the front side of the tree on the toe. This is the heel and this is the toe. And the further outside you go, the more this is maximum tension wood. This is maximum compression wood. In the middle is a gradient. Somewhere in here is probably neutral. Where does it always split? Right at that line. When you have a barber chair, it splits right at that line where compression and tension meet in the middle, and they just can't be reconciled. If you gut the middle out, you're not going to have a barber chair. If you gut the middle out, you have eliminated that battle of forces. You have relaxed it. All of that bound up compression and tension in the same member, you have relaxed it because it's no longer attached to the stump. So now you have purely tension wood and purely compression wood with everything in the middle removed. So as soon as you cut this is going to peel off and fall down. It might tear a tab off that tree, but it's never going to barber chair. And people will say it's really out of control, but honestly, the most destruction I ever see is from too much hinge. Always. It's never from severing it off. If I had a lightsaber out in the middle of the woods like this, most trees, if I had a lightsaber, I would saber them things right off, and they'll tip over, and yes, they will touch other trees, but they'll bounce right off and they'll roll to the ground. When I slick stump, I almost never hang a tree in another tree. When I leave hinge wood, it happens pretty often in a tangled up mess like this when you're just hand cutting. So before you go and judge another guy's cutting, think some things through, because I'm sure we've all made mistakes. I've learned most of my best lessons by the things I've smashed. And if you haven't smashed a couple things while you're logging, you ain't a logger yet. Think that through too. God bless.